What up? It's your boy, Will Nicholls, and today I'm going to be diving into a very, very special video, intertwining two of my fortes, which are astrology and trauma, as we get into Chiron and what it means to extrapolate wisdom from trauma. So, trauma. What does trauma mean? What is trauma? And how can we extrapolate it from the birth chart? So first and foremost, trauma, as we know it, can be seen in multiple avenues through the birth chart. The trauma that we are discussing today is more of the karmic baggage that we carry. Now, it's not going to be the whole picture, and I think this is a very important understanding to have. Trauma, in the way in which we discuss it today, is going to be more along the lines of our gifts, that which we can transmute and turn into service, which is what Chiron represents. Chiron represents sacred service through the transmutation of our traumas. So I want to just make a disclaimer and a point that this in no way will be able to share with you all of the trauma and the trauma indicators in a birth chart. There are many trauma indicators like Uranus, the whole sign of Aquarius, the nodes, Pluto, Neptune, and any aspects, harsh aspects to those planets can indicate trauma signatures. So we're not going to be discussing the entirety of that just because that would be a 5-hour video, to be honest. So we're not going to be discussing trauma in its entirety. It's just impossible. In fact, I may even have to make this a 2-part video. We'll see how long it goes. But I want to dive into the significance of trauma in the birth chart a little bit, and then talk about Chiron in each of the signs and how we, as individuals, through understanding our Chiron placement, can ultimately utilize our trauma or our wounds in order to create real magic in ourselves. All right? So trauma in general is defined, there's many different definitions of trauma, but the way in which I define trauma is a significant event that doesn't necessarily shape the outer world as much as it shapes the inner world. So trauma, as indicated by a holistic perspective, is what happens when an event in our lives takes place that changes us or causes us to no longer be us. It causes us to, in a sense, change or disassociate from our true self. We get disconnected from our true selves. An event, circumstance out there creates a lasting impact and change in here, a negative impact and change in here, and that is what we define as trauma. So trauma, in the sense of what I'm going to discuss today, is very much revolving around that. So how do we utilize trauma as a catalyst for our spiritual evolution and growth? Well, that is where Chiron comes into place, as identified through astrology. In astrology, you absolutely can identify trauma from the birth chart. Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind about that. It's been proven time and time again. But again, it's not just from Chiron. So when you hear astrologers talk about Chiron as your trauma, no, it's not your trauma placement. Chiron is a trauma placement. It can be a trauma placement, but most importantly, it is the source of your greatest gifts. You know, as Rumi said, the wound is where the light enters. So where we are wounded, we can also experience our greatest gifts, our greatest spiritual gifts. And Chiron was also the centaur, right, in Greek mythology, of magic. He taught magic to the gods. He taught the gods how to be warriors. He taught the gods how to experience the fullness of their immortality, because the gods are already immortal, right? He also trained lots of soldiers and demigods that were not necessarily immortal, but Chiron in general was seen as he was both training the gods, the titans, and the mortals or demigods. So in general, Chiron rules magic. It indicates our magical gifts, where our magical gifts, aka our spiritual gifts, can come from. What is the source of them? And most of the time, as anybody who's done the work can vouch for, is that our greatest gifts come from often our greatest struggles. The greatest gifts get unlocked when we go through some of the darkest periods of our lives. And I haven't found many exceptions to that in my experience, both from a personal level of going through it myself and just observing, but also from a professional level. I haven't had many, if I can't actually recall any exemptions to that. All gifts are created through some sort of catalyst that's usually negative or perceived as negative in the moment. And that catalyst is what allows us to transform. That catalyst is what allows us to really rise into our true gifts. So everyone has struggles. We all struggle. We all have challenges. We all have wounds. We all have traumas. And these traumas can make or break us. They can make us by building us stronger, building the foundation for ourselves so that we can rise on top and build up something great. Or they can cause us to build a wall around ourselves as a form of protection and harden ourselves off and ultimately limit ourselves. So really the choice is you. And I think as a baseline to any astrological work or divinatory work or any sort of spiritual work, the baseline is you, your conscious choice, and how you are perceiving it. So first and foremost, just wanted to get that out of the way. The baseline understanding of Chiron, of trauma, and how we should be approaching it. Because my approach is very different from a lot of people who practice astrology, and my approach is very different from a lot of people who practice trauma work. So I'm kind of the black sheep on both areas, which in a sense makes me good at my job, but it also can create a lot of polarity and resistance to the message. But I want you to understand at the baseline, all healing starts with you. It starts with a decision to heal. It starts with a willingness to heal. And it starts with a willingness to discover your true self. And the gateway to that, in my experience as an astrologer of over 7 years, is Chiron. There are other gateways too, as I've said, lots of different trauma indicators, different gateways for our gifts and stuff that you can look to, like the nodes, your ascendant, the ruler of your ascendant, Neptune. There's a lot, there's quite a few different, your midheaven. There's lots of different areas that we can look to for our gifts. But what I'm discussing in the context of gifts are your spiritual gifts or your soul gifts, and those soul gifts are usually unlocked through some sort of negative catalyst. In every experience that I've seen from a professional standpoint and from a personal standpoint of just observing, being an observer, every single time some sort of negative catalyst is what sets it off, what triggers and allows someone to truly awaken to their gifts. Okay? So without exception. So now I'm going to break down Chiron in each of the signs, what that may look like for you. And I'm not going to do the houses just because this gets a little complicated. Everyone wants to know Chiron in the houses and how connected it is. Chiron in the sign is going to be more accurate to you. The directive of your life, where that will come out perhaps, or where that can be catalyzed, will be seen through the house. And then any planets in the house, the ruler of that house, any aspects to Chiron, major aspects, especially negative aspect, harsh aspects, will obviously have an effect on that too. There's many, many nuances. I can't get to them all. It's just impossible because I don't got all day. All right? So without further ado, let's dive into Chiron in each of the signs. Okay? Chiron and Aries. So Chiron and Aries, the core focus here, the core wound, is usually related to rage, aggression, anger, frustration, fear, and domination. So either you getting dominated or you being put in a role where you're dominating people and hurting people. The aggression and the resentment that can come out of that is very, very common for Chiron and Aries. A lot of wounds are being purged with Chiron and Aries towards how we perceive aggression, how we perceive anger. We actually collectively right now as we speak have Chiron and Aries collectively. So if you're born during this time, if you're a little baby going back watching this maybe 10 years in the future, if it's still up, then this applies to you. Or if you are over 50 or so, then this will probably also apply to you. Chiron and Aries in general is directed through leadership, which means and the way that I'm going to kind of explain this is I'm going to be simultaneously talking about the kind of woundings and the traumas and the conditioning that occurs, while also looking at the effects, the negative effects of, or sorry, the positive effects of the gifts that are unleashed as well. So that's just a very important note to make. In general, Chiron in Aries is someone who has taken some sort of blow to the ego. Aries rules the ego, rules the head. Physically, sometimes Chiron can manifest physically as well. Sometimes Aries can mean a head injury that significantly changes the personality. I've seen that a few times actually with Chiron and Aries. In general though, it's usually some blow to the ego, meaning a parent growing up often may have prevented you from being a leader, being independent, rising into your own power. This can be, power play is a very big theme with Chiron and Aries. And in general, you have to watch for ego, because strengthening the ego is part of the soul's mission. It's part of the soul gift that you are learning to incorporate and integrate with Chiron and Aries. So the magic or the power that comes from this wound, comes from this trauma, is learning how to be an authentic, strong-willed leader. It's very rare nowadays. You look around, there's not many strong-willed leaders, right? There's a few, and they dominate. But everyone else, they're kind of like, even the leaders are wimps. So it is what it is. But Chiron and Aries, one of your greatest powers is the ability to lead with confidence. And that only comes from addressing this. And this is something that I want you all to understand watching this video, is that the only way you can unlock the power of Chiron, the gift of Chiron, is to address the core wound, And the core wound with Chiron and Aries is ultimately, I'm incapable of leading myself. I'm incapable of leading others. There's a wound around your capacity, your ability to be independent and truly lead from a place of authenticity. Now, there's ways that we can cope with this. Sometimes we cope with this trauma and these pains by being this over-domineering person. That's not truly unlocking your gifts. That's overcompensation. It's not coming from an authentic, genuine place, and you're going to burn out eventually, or you're going to face the consequences of that, the karmic repercussions, whether in this life or another, because that's just not how it's supposed to go. So Chiron and Aries, you have to learn how to be a strong, conscious leader in this lifetime, how to truly lead and channel the aggression, channel the rage, channel the intensity into passion, channel that sexual creative energy. There's a high sex drive here too. A lot of times that can be a wounding to sexuality with Chiron and Aries too, along with Chiron and Scorpio and Chiron in Libra, or if you have Chiron in the 8th house, there will be big themes about that as well. Okay, so things to think about. What else did I want to say about Chiron and Aries? In general, you just have to watch the ego. You have to be, is my ego deflated around certain people? Is my ego inflated around certain people? And observe that. A key point to working with Chiron, and I say this as my friend and co-host to the Mindful Moment podcast, Brett likes to call me Will Chiron Nicholls. I say this as someone who's very familiar with the work of Chiron and working with Chiron. So the key there is you have to be an observer. You have to be a witness. You cannot identify with these wounds. You have to be able to observe them as they are and go from there. So Chiron and Aries, mastering leadership, learning how to channel the intensity, the anger, the rage, and all of that into focus and aggression. Focus is a big challenge with Chiron and Aries, and not being reactive. Learning how to be, in a sense, non-reactive, but pursuing what is meaningful to you and leading from a place of authentic desire to serve. And it starts in here. When you serve yourself and you can truly lead yourself, then you can lead others. All right? Chiron in Taurus. Chiron in Taurus, these are, the key wounds here are related to value, how you value yourself, There's also can be some rigidity here. With Chiron and Taurus, you may tend to attract the same negative experiences over and over again, the same, almost the exact same identical experiences, or you may experience certain circumstances, situations, and events that cause you to feel like you have to limit your creative potential, feel like you have to limit your sensual essence, your grounded essence. A lot of times there's no fixed signs in general, but in all signs to some extent, there's not a whole lot of middle ground. There is and there isn't. The paradox of zodiacal signs and astrology in general is that it's a pendulum, right? It swings from one extreme to the other. There's polarities here. So the polarity with Taurus is deep, deep attachment or rigidity, absolute rigidity. I mean, rigidity and attachment can go hand in hand, absolutely. But what I mean by rigidity is an unwillingness to let go. And I guess that in a sense, that's attachment, you know? So the attachment is the big one. Attachment to resources, oftentimes a scarcity of resources with Chiron in Taurus. There can be a major scarcity of resources, and that all relates to self-value. So self-confidence is a very big one. Similar to Aries. Aries and Taurus share that same theme in Chiron, is the self-confidence. Aries can either have an inflated self-confidence or a deflated self-confidence, and Taurus is the self-confidence. You have to draw on your own inner confidence if you want to truly create major value in the outer world. That's just part of the experience. So part of the experience is really understanding why we need to operate in the way that we operate. You know, why do I feel like I need this thing out there? There can be a bit large attachment with Chiron and Aries to the outer world, right? Using outer things like money, resources, sex, food, all of these things as coping mechanisms to simulate inner value, true inner value, and that's not going to work out in the long term. That's all I'll say. It's not going to work out in the long term because it can't. You cannot depend on the outer world to show you your value. And one of the gifts with Chiron and Aries and some of the magic that comes from working through this is you learn how to truly value yourself. And when you truly value yourself, you have all the abundance in the world. Everything comes down to self-image, and that is a huge part of Chiron in Taurus. Self-image. Understanding self-image and the importance of self-image. And understanding how that defines your entire existence. And if you ever feel like you're lacking, you ever feel like you're in a drought with Chiron and Taurus and this core wound of value, keyword value, it's 99.999% of the time it's related to self-image. I would say 100%, but you know, you always got to leave 0.00001% to blame someone else, right? For the victim. I'm kidding, of course. It all comes down to self-value. So when you learn how to properly value yourself, Chiron in Taurus can become an abundance magnet. The opportunities that you're able to give people as a result of that when you truly value yourself is absolutely amazing. And the opportunities that you can bring towards yourself is absolutely amazing. These are all amazing, amazing things, but you have to learn how to give that to yourself first. That's the key lesson with Chiron and Taurus, is learning how to truly value yourself, truly see yourself, and anchor in that sense of value. It's all about perception. You know, Taurus rules the ajna, the third eye. It's all about perception on the soul level with Taurus, of learning how to properly perceive yourself. Because when you perceive the vision clearly, you can create it. But you have to believe it, and that's where self-value comes in and self-image. So the magic of Taurus is absolute abundance and truly mastery over manifestation and the physical realm, but and mastery over desire. A lot of times the attachment comes from desire. You know, Buddha and the whole story of the Buddha, that's related to Taurus, the age of Taurus, and Buddha was a Taurus, right? Learning how to relinquish desire and master desire, really, I would like to say, then relinquish desire, because I think desire is good, despite what the Buddha says. I understand it's also the cause of suffering to some extent, but we're here to desire things, attain them, and then realize the joy of the process through that. So that's part of Chiron in Taurus. Okay? Chiron in Gemini. Chiron in Gemini rules the mind. So Chiron in Gemini, the core key theme here is communication. So with Chiron and Gemini, oftentimes the core wound is related to your voice, how you're expressing yourself. So again, you see the progression here, right? You see the progression is like independence, leadership with Aries. Then we have value with Taurus. Now we have communication with Gemini, right? There's a progression here. So with Gemini, Chiron and Gemini, if you have Chiron and Gemini, this is related to how you communicate. Are you communicating from a place of authenticity? Are you able to understand the paradox of communication? Gemini is the paradox. It really represents yin and yang. It's the twins. It represents duality. It's the start of duality. So the Chiron in Gemini, though, can get lost in duality, lost in the extremes. This is a common thing, extreme polarity, either being over-talkative to the point of oversharing or being under-talkative to the point of not expressing your true needs, wants, and desires. These are all very important themes that we can experience with Chiron and Gemini. But the main lesson here that we're learning through Chiron and Gemini, if you have this placement, is you're learning how to properly communicate and express the will. It starts with the will in Aries, learning how to truly create, project the passion as opposed to the frustration, and lead thyself. And then it starts with the desire, and the desire to experience the will, Aries, in Taurus. And then it comes to communicating, speaking the will, speaking and communicating desire. That's what Gemini is all about. And that is where the paradox also occurs, because this is where suffering can greatly occur. If we have not mastered communication, we're going to suffer immensely. We're going to suffer immensely. So what's the gift of Gemini? What's the gift of Chiron and Gemini? Well, the gift of Chiron and Gemini is learning how to master the voice. When you master your voice, when you master your sound current, when you truly understand how to communicate from a place, you communicate from your core. In yoga, we call this, communicating from the solar plexus, or your navel, or communicating from the dantian, projecting your energy through the dantian and then up through whatever higher chakra you want to communicate through. If I'm trying to really project out my heartfelt gratitude, I'm projecting it through my heart. If I'm really trying to communicate something across and resonate with someone, I'm taking it from my core, which is your source, it's your seat of the energy, to my throat. If I really want to project out my vision, I'm taking it from my navel and I'm projecting it through my third eye. If I really want to experience that oneness, I'm projecting it through the crown. So there's all types of things that you can, if I want to express out my sexuality, then I take it from the solar plexus and bring it down to the sacral and blast it out that way. So with Chiron and Gemini, the major gift is the direction of communication, learning how to fluidly communicate ultimately with everybody. And that in itself is absolute wizardry. Not only will you be able to, command your reality, abracadabra, as I speak, I command, right? That's the power of Chiron and Gemini, is mastery over the voice. And when you master your voice, you are able to penetrate and project to every single individual that's out there. And that is a superpower, my friends. That's an absolute superpower. Chiron in Cancer. The core wound here is the mother wound. So that's usually related to the feminine, the mother, the goddess. There's many ways of perceiving it, but there's usually a disconnect or an overdependency on the nurturing aspect of one's consciousness. That's the core wound of Chiron in Cancer, is either being overly dependent or wanting to harden the heart, get into the crab shell of Cancer and be disconnected from the power of the mother. The power of the mother. So Chiron and Cancer really can really challenge you, to really connect with the maternal lineage of one's ancestry. So this is oftentimes Chiron and Cancer are the mother healers. They're healing your maternal lineage of your DNA vibration. And with the healing of the maternal aspect, you are in turn, you have a greater capacity to nurture. You have a greater capacity to be the nurturing one, to nourish those you come into contact with. This is a very sacred and psychic placement as well. When one is connected to Chiron and Cancer, when you've not been disconnected from the mother wound, and instead you've actually been reconnected. And even if you are you're someone who's over nurturing or over attached, as Chiron and Cancer people can be, there's going to be an increase of the psychic gifts with Chiron and Cancer. Cancer, all placements, Cancer placements are very psychic. I've got a Cancer moon. Cancers in general are very, very intuitive, very psychic. So Chiron and Cancer, though, the core wound is the mother wound and healing the nurturing aspect of self. Now, we all have mother wounds, so, like I said, don't think that just because you don't have Chiron and Cancer, you don't have mother wounds. Of course you do. But Chiron and Cancer, there's an absolute higher emphasis on the mother wounds. There's a much bigger emphasis on the mother, the maternal. And whether that is, in some cases, the mother not being a mother, even if she was in your life, or maybe leaving your life too early. There's lots of manifestations of that, how that can play out. Just like how, like I said, Chiron and Taurus can sometimes be not having the resources one needs to feel nourished. Chiron and Gemini, not being able to share your voice as a child and as an adult, not feeling heard. Chiron and Aries, the core, wounding that can come from childhood, can often be associated to a feeling of inadequacy, lack of independence. And Chiron and Cancer, it's that not feeling nurtured or feeling like overly dependent on mother, as opposed to having the right amount of nurturing that allows you to feel empowered. And from that place of empowerment, you can then go and empower others, nurture others, share with others, give the nourishment, the milk, the sacred milk, to others. And part of the gift with Chiron in Cancer that gets transmuted when you address the wound is learning how to truly be in tune with the divine feminine. So even if you're a man with Chiron and Cancer, there's obviously a core mother wound there, but what I mean when I say in touch with the divine feminine, it has nothing to do with gender. It's all about understanding the feminine aspect from a healthy place. If you're a man, it's relating to the feminine and understanding her, understanding your feelings, understanding your intuitions, understanding your gut sensations. And if you're a woman, it's connecting with your true primordial essence as an embodiment of the feminine. Okay? Chiron and Leo. So with Chiron and Leo, there's a huge wounding or distortion around how one is perceived. This has a lot to do actually with being liked, desiring to fit in with others, is a big theme here. What else have I seen with Chiron and Leo? Chiron and Leo also can just be this, there can be a lot of emphasis towards how I perceive myself. Like I discussed with Chiron and Taurus in regards to self-image, that's more of using outer things, physical, tangible things like resources and validation from money and things and materialized stuff to give you a sense of satisfaction. With Leo, it's a desire more from relationships and interactions. So here you have to watch out because a lot of times Chiron and Leo can bring up a lot of insecurities. I would say actually that's probably the biggest thing is just overall insecurity with how you are valued and perceived by the world. So to differentiate with Chiron and Taurus, the value and the self-image correlation is more towards the inner process. It's always towards the inner process, but it's more towards the inner process and how one relays outward to the tangible forms of value. Versus Chiron and Leo is more or less the emotional forms of value, how you perceive yourself. A lot of times this can be, Chiron and Leo can be, you'll go through these waves of being overly confident, similar to Chiron and Aries, being overly confident as a way of compensation versus being very insecure deep down. And that's usually the pattern, is it's like an ebb and flow, but generally it's pretty steady along overcompensation through inflated ego in order to make you feel better about yourself. And the truth is, there's a lot of radiance with Chiron in Leo. There's a lot of power that can come from Chiron in Leo, but you have to learn how to wield the light properly. Leo is the sun. The sun does not think about shining. The sun does not brag about shining. The sun just shines. And the sun does not shine for itself. Starts with shining for itself, of course, but the sun shines selflessly. And as the gift of Chiron in Leo is it's a deep radiance where you are able to be a beacon of light. You're able to be a lighthouse for other people. And that's real power. And the magic behind that is often associated with really being extremely courageous. Because when you have the courage to not only just pick yourself up from those moments of insecurity which you learn through Chiron in Leo, but also pick others up along the way, that shows immense courage, that shows immense value, and that shows that you're truly courageous for the right reasons. Fire signs, in many ways, I call them the children of the zodiac, but they're also, in many ways, the leaders of the zodiac. And the way in which Leo leads is through the heart. So it's really about not letting your big fat head become inflated and instead allowing your heart to guide you forward, because your heart is where the magic is. Your heart is where the power is. All right? And when you understand this, then life gets a lot better, not only for you, but for all the relationships that you have around you. You feel less insecure because you're of service. When you're focused on service, you don't have time for insecurities. So the only times that insecurities will arise is when you're too focused on yourself. It's not about you, my friends. It's about how you can serve. And that's part of the gift and the power that you learn with Chiron and Leo, is how to wield that light accordingly. It's a lot. It's a lot of light. So how do we wield it accordingly? How do we wield it in a way that really helps us shine for others? That's what we learn with Chiron and Leo. Chiron and Virgo. Chiron and Virgo is the wound here is around perfectionism and learning how to let go of the perfectionistic tendencies. It's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. The past is not going to be perfect. The present is not going to be perfect. The future is not going to be perfect. Not to your standards, at least. So if you have Chiron and Virgo, you have to watch for criticism. Your worst inner critic. This is your worst critic is yourself. Your worst, and this is, again, a lot of these concepts, as you can see, as with any archetype, are very much universal principles condensed into a singular archetype. And from an astrological perspective, that would be a zodiac sign. And with Virgo, it's the perfectionistic tendencies of ourselves. That's what comes out in Virgo. The obsessiveness, impulsiveness, OCD, the need for things to be a certain way all the time. And as much as Virgo is a mutable sign, I would say they're probably the least mutable sign out of all the mutable signs if I think about it. Because there's when you are blinded by perfectionism, whether that's in health, that can be a big aspect, trying to have the perfect body or trying to have the perfect diet. That can be a big thing with Chiron and Virgo. Chiron and Virgo can also be, in general, wanting everything to be how you want it to be. And the truth is, in life, things aren't always going to be how you want them to be, and you have to learn how to accept that in its totality. Letting go of the inner critic will allow you to be less of an outer critic. That's part of the gift. And the gift with Chiron and Virgo is organization. Organization of thoughts, of mental flow, of communication, and organizing others as well. Helping others become organized through is part of the magic. There's also green thumb here, so a tendency to be good with plants can be pretty therapeutic with all earth signs, especially Chiron. If you have Chiron in an earth sign, any sort of green work, getting out in nature can really help you ground and release the perfectionism, because nature does not hurry. Nature is innately perfect from our perspective, but it's really imperfect. A tree is rarely ever perfectly straight. Trees are curved, trees have edges, trees have bumps. There's lots of different qualities of nature that are extremely imperfect, on a micro level, but on a macro level, you can see the perfectionism, you can see the intentional synchronization of nature, and you need to direct that towards both the self and others. You have very high standards. Chiron and Virgo can have very high standards, which you often learn from parent, usually the mother, sometimes the father, depending on where it's placed. But if it's in usually the lower half of the birth chart, it'll be, the perfectionism will come from the mother. So just learn to notice and observe that instead of trying to identify with that. When things don't go your way, just say, so what? When things aren't how you perfectly determined them to be in your mind, how you perfectly organized them and spent how long thinking about them and obsessing about them, just say, so what? Who cares? I know that'll drive you crazy, but that's part of the lesson. You know, that's part of the lesson with Chiron and Virgo, is learning how to properly organize yourself, ground yourself, and then ultimately nurture yourself through not putting so much pressure on yourself. There's a lot of pressure. Chiron and Virgo can often have a lot of pressure as a kid to be overly independent when maybe you shouldn't have been independent as you were, and that can cause a lot of perfectionism. So the gift is, like I said, organization. But organization comes from not wanting things to be perfect, but understanding that things need to have a flow to them. And when you align them in a certain way, a specific way, it's like, you know, if we apply this to magic or the principle of ceremonial magic, there's a certain order to a ritual, right? There's a certain order to a ritual. There's a certain process that you need to follow if you want it to be successful in a certain way. This is what separates people that are unfamiliar with ceremonial magic, chaos magic, any sort of white magic or other magic, is that what separates them is that understanding, the understanding that there is innately an order to things, and it's not the way that the mind wants it, it's the way that the soul or God or soul or angel wants it. Another way of saying that is we don't know what's best, but God does. Man plans, God laughs. You know that quote? It's very relevant for Chiron and Virgo. So you're the great organizer and very, very capable of seeing things and finding the flow of things when you're in flow. When you're not in flow, then your advice ends up being criticism oftentimes, and when it comes from a place of ego, whether that's conscious or subconscious, you're going to run into problems. Okay, so that's Chiron and Virgo. Chiron in Libra, and this will be the final one for this video, and then I'll make another video of Libra to, or I guess Scorpio to Pisces after this. Okay, so Chiron in Libra, I'll end it on this one. Chiron in Libra, the core wounding is towards relationships of all kinds. The relationship wounding is always learned from parents and the childhood. So oftentimes Chiron in Libra didn't have great role models in childhood to show them what the highest potential of a relationship could be. There's many, many amazing coaches, speakers, guides that end up being incredible people who have Chiron in Libra, because when you're able to resolve the relationship dilemma and the woundings and the traumas that arise from this placement, you're able to better understand human relationships. And when you understand human relationships, that becomes an invaluable asset to you. I actually have Chiron in Libra, 29th degree. Very, very intense degree. But Chiron in Libra, there's the deep wounding is towards your worthiness and codependency within relationships, is learning how to not be codependent or become someone that enables codependency in others. And I've been in situations that have kind of been both. So you have to really master this. Libra is about balance. It's about the scales. It's about understanding the true essence of relationships, which is a mirror. So when you are being overly dependent on someone and someone is being overly dependent on you, you're enabling each other and you're limiting each other from rising into your highest potential. But when you decide to not enable that, when you decide to truly nourish your own, fill up your own cup, nourish your own self, then that will be reflected in your relationships. And if it's not, then you can be aware of the triggers that may be causing this experience, this feeling, this sensation within you. Okay? So Chiron and Libra, one of the biggest challenges is relationships, having long withstanding relationships. A lot of times Chiron and Libra people can have divorced parents. Almost every example that I've seen of Chiron and Libra has had either divorced parents, a parent died, or a parent was just gone all the time. Maybe they weren't divorced, but they were just not there all the time. Sometimes even cheating within the parental role. So, we learn all these tendencies and these patterns, and then we bring them and carry them into our relationships. And this is part of the trauma that we got to transmute. And that transmutation, or that mastery that comes from that, is you have an incredible eye for human relationships, of understanding what really works and what really doesn't work. The only challenges and blockages is your own self. So a lot of times you see this time and time again. A lot of times people can be really amazing coaches, but then have really shitty relationships. And this is the unfortunate reality for a lot of people with Chiron and Libra. And the true mastery is taking your own medicine. Taking your own medicine. That's something that I'm doing time and time again. Because you can't be sharing something from an authentic place if you don't yourself apply it. That's the truth. That's the fact at the end of the day. So you have to be able to apply it. You have to be able to integrate that. And when you do, the relationships in your life, not just intimate relationships, all relationships, flourish. And that is one of the great qualities of Chiron in Libra, is you're able to create long-lasting, amazing, sustaining relationships because of your desire to keep them sustained, because of your desire to truly help and give to people. This is the giver placement, and I'm not saying this being biased, but this is the giver placement, and sometimes at the detriment of you. And you have to understand when you're giving and you're, in a sense, enabling dependency, versus when you're giving from a true place of unconditional love. And in that same regard, that means that there are boundaries in place, because you only have a limited amount of time and energy. And if you're expending that in a limited way, then you're preventing yourself from truly experiencing the vastness of what you could be giving, because you're giving in the wrong direction and giving to the wrong person at the wrong time. And that's part of the powerful lesson that Chiron and Libra learns. But the transmutation of that and the gift that emerges from that is the deep understanding and satisfaction that you get when you do nourish yourself, when you do find that middle path to walk, and you understand how to nourish yourself and your relationships simultaneously, so that you don't create any sort of codependent dynamic. And that's the true mastery with Chiron and Libra. So that concludes part 1 of the Chiron series, as we discuss trauma and transmutation from the lens of Chiron and the magic that comes when we address our traumas and our wounds. And as I said in the beginning of this video, this is not all that there is to trauma as from the lens of astrology, but this is a very important part of trauma and the journey that we take. Because when we learn how to transmute some of our core wounds, then we can really step into an authentic place and truly be of service to the whole. So I look forward to sharing part 2 with you, Scorpio to Pisces, and I will see you on the other side. Make sure you smash the like button, smash the subscribe button, and if you haven't already, comment down below your Chiron sign. If you were part of this first video and I touched on one of your Chiron placements, does it resonate, and how is that relevant to your life? I'd really like to know and read the comments. Make sure you also follow me on Instagram. And if you're someone who struggles with confidence, if you're someone who really struggles with stress, and you're looking to truly let go of a lot of the trauma and the baggage that you carry, you're really ready to take action on that, make sure you send me a DM on Instagram, DM me help, to apply for my upcoming program, Unfuck Your Mind, which is happening this week on the 17th. It begins, enrollment begins. And it's going to be a very, very potent 6-week intensive container that's going to show you the exact steps to take in order to develop a deep sense of inner confidence, manage stress like an absolute boss, and let go of that emotional baggage so you can live a truly free and liberated life. So if you want to join me on that odyssey, psychedelic odyssey of healing, of deep innate confidence and increase of self-worth, and manage stress when it comes your way, stress and crisis, send me a DM on Instagram and I'll walk you through the application process to see if you'd be a good fit for that. Love you guys. See you very, very soon for another video. And I'll be dropping part 2 on the Chiron series very soon, my friends. Much love.